Topping Talks.
Let's see it.
105 hours a week can't be beat. Welcome to Topping Talks. Topping Talks is a Topping Tribune production, and today's episode is proudly sponsored by Topping Technologies and ExpressVPN. Topping Talks is also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and all of your favorite platforms. Topping Technologies is an IT value-added reseller and services company with a special proficiency in IT security. Heck, I see their founder at least twice a day. Gotta say he's quite handsome and brilliant. He's me, you see, that's the joke. If you're an IT leader or a business owner, you can reach out to the team at sales@toppingtechnologies.com. Also, are you part of the 3.6% of Americans who still care about their IT privacy? If you are, then perfect. ExpressVPN can assist. Even though 96% of stats are made up on the spot, ExpressVPN does give a 100% guarantee via the 30-day back money guarantee. Now, without further ado, today I'm proud to say I'm interviewing Charles Valdez, who is the head of security for MyTech Systems, as well as the founder and owner of Vista Restaurant. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
So winding back the clock a couple of years, how did you first get into IT?
Coming into IT was quite an experience because I was not a strong believer in IT. My original brush with technology was to declare that home computers would be a fad.
Oh, no.
Right? So my cousins ended up getting a computer when I was very young. I wanted to spend more time on the Atari, where I thought that there was a real future. But
The OG 2600?
the 2600.
There you go.
Yeah. I didn't have the resources for 5200, right? Like that wasn't me. So.
Oh, how many people bought that though? Like 18 people?
We're also glued to that joystick.
Exactly.
But when they got that, they started really taking a look at it and utilizing it. And I was like, oh, this thing's just going to be a fad. It's going to be no good. It's going to be useless. And then they told me somebody smarter than us predicted that there would be more computers in homes than microwaves or VCRs.
Really?
And I was like, the audacity.
Yeah.
I was like, we all need that VCR, you know? But if you fast forward till now, you can see that I started off being very wrong in the beginning.
Yep.
So here we are.
And then what was your first role?
Well, my first role was to transition out of waiting tables. I had a background in the service industry because it was easy to get into. Service industry is wonderful for anybody who's out there if you've got the thick skin for it, right? Dealing with the public can be tough. And so I did not have the longevity in the service industry or the thick skin for it. So I started looking at doing something different. And I saw an ad in the newspaper. And it said, "Are you in the service industry?" Yeah, that'll
Newspaper.
Yeah, it's not just for bird cages anymore,
Right?
No, there was want ads and classifieds back then. You used to just sit down and open it up and start circling it with a pen. That's not cliche. That stuff really happened. There was also telephone booths back then. You drop a quarter in there.
Oh yeah.
So as we went down that path. What ended up happening was I saw an ad where it said, "Are you tired of the service industry and the yada, yada, yada? Come check with us." And it turned out to be a point-of-sale company known as Southern Hospitality Systems off of Harry Hines, if you've heard of that. And so at Southern Hospitality Systems, they sold a variety of point-of-sale systems. The primary one was Squirrel at the time, but there was also Iris, and eventually they started moving into Aloha, which turned out to be an even bigger one.
Everyone in retail knows that one.
Yep. And so what it was putting in the point of sale systems, and I would be providing the technical support. And so it was grueling because the way I started off, I just won't forget my first day. I sat down with this lady named Michelle, and she was, grab your mouse and click on the command prompt icon.
Oh, no way.
And if you're not in technology, that sounds intimidating. Command prompt icon, what in the hell? And she was like, the DOS icon.
What?
And I'm like, oh, man. And back then, the Windows desktop had this little icon that said DOS, D-O-S, and it was like in red and yellow and some other color, maybe green.
Really?
And and once I saw it, I was like, I double clicked on it, and she was like, okay, now type this, and that was it. Like once she started saying, now type this, like typing I could do, but yeah, that's how it started. And so providing technical support for point of sale systems, then eventually downloading anything I could find, including AOL.
Oh.
So back then you could only get it on the CD. So I started trying to download it through a 56K modem.
Oh my gosh.
And that took the network down, pissed my boss off. He spilled his martini when he threw it at me.
Oh jeez.
Just
Did
everything.
you dodge it?
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Everything. And eventually, once I broke things enough and I didn't want to incur the wrath of Christopher, I ended up started learning how to fix things, right? How to reverse engineer and how to see things. And, it just took off from there. Just got better and better at it.
What kind of things were you fixing? Like IT hardware that would go bad or software bugs or?
Everything. Broke modems, point of sale printers, downloaded. I downloaded a virtual assistant once. That was not a good move, not my proudest moment. But there was no security on the network or the system. It was just basically your own word. Did you do this? Did you not? You just go out there and just download something, and that was it, right? There was no security controls.
Oh, no.
Back then, just like technology, right? Anything that you invent and come forward with, it's always the administrator that has all of the access, puts in all the safeguards, makes all the decisions, the configuration, everything. And then eventually you realize that there has to be a special part for security. And so then the security portion comes out. But, technology always wrestles. Well, let me rephrase that. IT operations departments always wrestle with security because it's like mobile, right?
Yep.
So it's, we have mobile assets and stuff, and security comes along and goes, well, this is how you should do stuff. Well, what are you talking about? I do mobile or API security. We do this and we do that, and we know how to configure it. And then security eventually comes out and goes, oh yeah, but I'm a specialist in that,
Yep.
So it's always that same back and forth, ebb and flow, and so back then, it was MCSC administrators, and you're either an MCSC or an MCDBA, right? So you're either a database administrator or a network administrator, and the network administrators were the jacks of all trades, and it was pre-security and before specialists or anything like that. So eventually I started seeing that there was a need for security, and just realized that it was something that I enjoyed a lot, and my career just gravitated and became an evolution toward that practice,
Then what is your next move from there? So you work in the restaurant industry, and do you go to a different one, or where'd you go?
No. I was in point of sale for a while, and then eventually, what ended up happening was during that time you become a generalist, right? Your interview. Anybody who interviewed during that time will sympathize with me. You would go to a company and you would have a certification or two.
Yeah.
MCSE being the biggest one. That meant I knew what I was doing. At least was familiar with stuff, right? I knew Active Directory. I knew how to roll things out. I knew how to configure things, and it was a broad spectrum of things, right? Things, because you're the jack of all trades. We prided ourselves on that. And eventually, as you go down that path, you start selling yourself to everybody. I'm not a sales guy. That's not something I can do. I either talk too much or I don't build the value. I don't know. I can't close the deal. But it was like, oh, you got to trust me. I'm really good at this, and da-da-da-da-da. And then everybody else in the world was out there saying the same thing. So it was like, how do you differentiate yourself? Like, what do you do? And you just get tired of that, going over and over the same thing. So eventually, as you're working through that, you get two different things that happen. One, something pushes you and something pulls you. So you start pushing your way out of being a technology guy. Because now things start getting very specific, right? Are you an SAP person? Is that what you're talking about? Are you a DBA person? Like, tell me what your specialty is. But then more so for me, my personal journey was I started getting pulled into security. I would see things and I would say, oh, that's a problem. Or I would start hearing about these groups that could go in and break things or be able to infiltrate things. Or you would learn about credential thefts or, crab walks or things like that, or moving toward the crown jewels of things. And you start seeing stuff just really, really cool, right? Because at that point, you were basically an administrator and you knew how to work a system or how to go into a control panel or how to do certain things. But on the back end, you really didn't know how things were engineered. And so once you start like a real curious interest in engineering, that's where your chops start coming in. And the only way you're going to have great chops is if you have that curiosity and you really, really want to know how things work. How do things fit together? So eventually, years later, you go from knowing what to secure to knowing how to secure it, right? You're like, well, you turn this on and do that. And then eventually, as a professional, you start learning why. Why do we secure stuff, right? If it's a server with the colors of the rainbow or the alphabet, I don't give a crap. That's like public stuff. I don't care. So you start learning about data privacy. Why do we secure things? And it's not just like, hey, this is my bank account information. It could be like company secrets, right? Something confidential. It could be the secret sauce to what we do, intellectual property, right?
Could be code, could be schematics for a new product or widget they're manufacturing.
The best example I ever heard was in the one that I use with people when people start asking me, well, how do I classify data, Charles? Like, what's important? What's a corporate secret? Okay, so let's say that Microsoft, great example. In the I would say, the apex of Bill Gates' career, right? He was the face of Microsoft, leading Microsoft, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
What happens if one day Bill Gates gets an email to his work account from his doctor and it says, oh, I'm sorry, you've got something horrific and you're going to have to retire and focus on your, and if he's leading that company and has been for years, what do you think happens to their stock, right? Especially if they don't have a succession plan in place.
Yeah.
And that's not the biggest secret in the world, but it certainly is valuable, right? And so
stock would crater overnight.
Right, exactly. So now if I go in there and I have access to this and I get that email and then I exfiltrate it out and I keep it, somewhere safe and I tell them, give me $4 million or else I'm going to release this.
Yep.
Well, when I do a little bit of math in my head and I'm like, let me see, how many shares do we have multiplied by their value, how much it'll go to? Yeah. Here's your 4 million. Shut up, go away, and never talk to me again, right?
What's the market cap? Oh, yeah, a couple trillion?
Right.
Yeah, 4 million?
So when you start talking about, what do we protect and why? Well, there's your why. Like that's what you learn as a security professional. You start going into that area. And then once you start becoming a security leader, you start looking at what's the footprint of security and how do I guide it and how do I get it there and how am I a mindful manager and how do I optimize what I'm doing? And you're going in these areas. And then eventually your road should lead you to a security executive where counterintuitive to everything you've got, you just throw it all out. You're just like, I don't care about security. I don't care about security at all. And it's a weird thing to say, and it's a weird thing when you say it to people because it freaks them out because they're wondering, where are you going with this?
Yep.
And you tell them, I care about what does my company do for a living and how can I help them do that responsibly?
Yep.
Because if I'm working with Topping Technologies and you're not capturing, let's say, for instance, credit card information, why would I put in a PCI relevant network, right?
Precisely.
Why would I go to, go put in some HIPAA relevant controls or something? I'd be wasting your time, your money, your effort, everything. So I don't care about that. I could know all about it, but I don't care about security as far as that's concerned. What do? You build space shuttles? Oh, fantastic. Let's do that responsibly. Let's do that safely, right? So then you're right-sizing security. You're not being too intrusive, and you're starting to take a look at things from least privileged perspective, and then you're starting to focus more on the teams being agnostic, on the teams being empowered, on the engagement of the teams. And then you start getting a little bit better workflow with your operations and with the work that your roadmaps and all of the things that you're going to put in. So that's kind of the evolution and where the mindset goes and where you flow eventually if you stay in the game long enough, right?
Yeah, precisely. Yeah, it's all about knowing what data needs to be protected and how to enable a business. I mean, one of the biggest issues with cybersecurity is the CEOs, people just think security is there to slow them down. It's like,
oh, they know that.
Yeah, it's like, you got to make sure the business is protected. Otherwise, the business goes bye-bye.
Yeah, and that's a point is, as a security professional, there was a time when you didn't get a seat at the big kids table, right?
Oh, yeah, that's changed a lot recently.
So you got a CFO sitting over there and the CEO sitting over there and the CMO sitting there and, put in as many CXOs in there as you want. And they're like, security, we'll talk to you when we have a need for you. If there's a breach, we'll come talk to you, something like that.
They'll yell at you then.
But not anymore. Not anymore. Now it boils down not only to business use cases, but the impact on the business. And when I say that, I mean, if you're not going to force them to spend money for security technologies and controls and put it on every single thing, they're going to be grateful. They're going to be like, oh, so we don't have to put it on this. No, you don't have to lock all that stuff down because that stuff's public, right?
Yep.
That... And again, making sure that it's segmented and secured in the correct way. You don't want to just have this flat network where anybody can have access to anything.
Oh God, no.
But if you say, hey, this just has a Rolodex of our email addresses or, something very public that we publish anyway on our website, right?
Yeah.
That's not a big deal. You don't have to go crazy and lock that down and have multi-factor authentication just to be able to access, things like that. Which, I'm sure I'm giving people heartburn when I don't advocate for security. But the other portion, too, is you have to be able to, in a very diplomatic and a very professional way, be able to convey what is the impact if something does happen. Because there'll be companies that, their primary revenue generator and their departments that are glamorous and glitzy and get all the wonderful expense accounts, they're the ones that are generating the revenue, and they want to know, wow, what does it matter? Why do I need security? And there is a point where you say you could see some real brand impact. I mean, if you, it's not a good look if you end up getting compromised for the wrong reasons or something stupid, right? Like if you have vulnerabilities that are a year old, or no, let's be, if you have vulnerabilities that are 3-4 years old, and there's patches available, right? And then if you're in fintech or if you're in some other regulated industry, and hopefully nobody's going through this, but if you are then compromised as a result of that, then the questions are going to come. I mean, everybody's going to, Monday quarterback what you did. And they're going to be like, how could you be so stupid? And and why didn't you prioritize this? And if the executive leadership is solely focused on, well, we were looking at our revenue generating departments, and that's where we sunk in our investment, and we really didn't think about the need for a CISO with centralized policies or a governance, risk, and compliance group. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but the good news is that now, from the cybersecurity perspective, you're being considered a partner in business as well, right? You're not just a specialist that does something very, very narrow, And the more that technology transcends business and integrates itself into the business, the more that they're going to turn to you and go, and how do we control that? Hey, we want to use Chat GPT. How do we, what's the risk here? What's going to go on? I'm like, well, it depends on what you're going to put out there and how much of it you want it scraped off your platform and where do you want it to go? So there is a lot of, I would say, trending toward giving everybody a fair seat at the table, including, security and cybersecurity and data privacy and all these other areas that you want to have a little bit of control and safeguard knowledge around.
Well, that was a big change, just like in terms of organizational structures. I mean, for the longest time, the CISO used to directly report to the CIO.
Yep.
And again, depending on their preferences, sometimes, heads will butt because you got different priorities. Security wants more secure, might be against the infrastructure team. Depending on the org structure, maybe they consider firewalls to be infrastructure, and they're saying you shouldn't get to play with that, or you should get a choice in that. Well, depending on your organization, sometimes firewalls play with better manufacturers. Sometimes you want, one throat to choke. You want best of breed versus all in one. So again, it needs to be more of a conversation. More and more, we're seeing CISOs report directly to the CFO, or the CEO. So they get a little bit more autonomy, a little bit more.
I've seen them. I've seen them report to the board a lot. Or also there's a chief risk officer. Sometimes it falls under the umbrella of risk, because risk obviously is going to take into consideration more than just technical risk. I mean, they're going to be looking at a lot of different things, but it's definitely an evolution that's coming along right now. But the good news, like I said, it's not a voice that's being quelled, and I don't think anybody would argue that security is not going to go anywhere. It's not just, it's not a fad that's happening. It's not like my first prediction where I was like, technology is a fad.
Well, I mean, it's quite literally too lucrative for malicious actors. I mean, it used to be like when you look at business and where do they lose money, where's the biggest risk? Back in the day, it used to be more physical. I mean, people go to a physical store, they would rob you, and they would take your physical cash. I mean, more and more, look at the proliferation of e-commerce past 5-10 years, especially. I mean, that's the biggest threat vector. That's where all the money's being going. Then you have intellectual property. I mean, nowadays you can get malware as a service, ransomware as a service.
It's weird because you want to know, like, what do you value? That's really what they're out there doing. They're like, what does this group value, right? And it could be nothing to one group and everything to another group. So if you think about it, and I don't know this story too well, but I think this is the way it went. There was a time where Game of Thrones, of course,
bee's knees.
It was it. And there was like the final script coming up or something like that. And then there was a compromise where nefarious actors actually got their hands on that script, and they were like, we're going to release it, which is basically going to, tell everybody how it ends, and everybody's, having, it was kind of like The Sopranos way back in the day. They'd have these watching parties and stuff, and honestly, the script, like, to you and me, is that going to end up having an impact on our lives? No, not really. But everybody who does any sort of business partnership with HBO and has sponsorship deals or has any sort of, marketing deals or anything there, it's going to be difficult for them because the whole point is to get as many eyeballs going around that show. And so if we ruin it, then people might not tune in. If they don't tune in, then there goes part of your dollars. And, it's kind of like a Super Bowl commercial. If I tell you how the game's going to end, people aren't going to be watching those commercials because the eyeballs aren't tuned in. But like I said, it's interesting because it does show that cybersecurity is just so prolific because we're protecting whatever, in air quotes, whatever it is, kind of like eBay. Whatever it is, you can find it here. Well, whatever it is, we have to protect it.
Precisely.
So it's something else.
Do you think it'll be oversaturated? I mean, it's one of those things where you feel like in traditional IT, like there's there's been a new server company or storage company in years, but every 2 minutes there's a cybersecurity company.
Yeah.
And I mean, some CEOs are getting, what is it? They're getting fatigued because there's already so many breaches. Do you think we'll see
Yeah.
a market correction, or will we see the same amount of new resource and development and new companies coming out?
I think that we're going to see a continuous uptick, and the trend is going to keep going forward because it's only limited by imagination, right? So that's, I mean, like I said, whatever is important to you, if there's value, if there's monetary value and compensation that can be tied to it, almost like YouTube streamers, right? Like, we don't know what's going to make. Dude famous is famous for one thing, right? And then PewDiePie or whatever was famous for something else. Well, if something was to threaten that secret sauce that they have, well, they would want to secure it. And that's when you get cybersecurity. So it's like, that's how it works. Well, think about artificial intelligence, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you've got large learning models, deep learning models, you've got generative AI, you've got a myriad of different narrow and wide lens technologies, and then they're powered by these neurons and these networks that optimize and just generate answers at the drop of, I mean, it's like a cheat code to be able to do things on these things. And the question is, when you utilize the prompt, am I putting in my secret sauce, right? Like you saw it happen to Samsung. They had engineers that put in their intellectual property. And then it's like, oh, oops, sorry about that. So companies don't know that right away. If they start off, they're like, we'd love to use ChatGPT to generate templates for our HR department to do blah, 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 blah. But the risk is only as far away as the next user prompt, right? And so then you turn to your security group and you start asking, how do I secure? And they won't have the answers, right? Some do, some don't. But there's a lot of times where the technology is so new that you're like, I don't know, like, what am I going to? You got to go research it. The exhaustion that you hear about comes from the expectation that should be zero tolerance for everything. And I think that's where the correction is going to come. So when you have an executive leadership team that understands that you can't bat 1,000 all the time, it just can't be done, then there's going to be some relief, right? Now, don't get me wrong, there should still be some sort of standards and metrics that you should aspire for. The question is going to be, what's reasonable? What's obtainable, right? So SLAs for uptime, they're crazy way up there. But if there was something that caused them to be around 70% in the entire, no, that's horrific. But if the end of them just being extreme to illustrate a point, but if the industry came back and accepted that as the norm, then we would all breathe a sigh of relief and stuff, So it just depends. I think that's where the pressure relief will come from. But as far as going away or market correction for security, with the amount of technology that exists out there, with the innovations that happen every single day, all the time, it really is a question of how much are companies going to invest in protecting what their secret sauce is.
True.
I mean, that's what's important. And governments as well, right? MC, you just go on and on and on. It could be a movie. It could be the next series of Loki or whatever it is. People are eventually going to be like, no, we need somebody to really be safeguarding these things. And we need to put policies around that and, defense in depth around that. And we need to make sure that non-repudiation is a thing and that, it's almost like you're advocating for zero trust in anything you want to protect.
Yeah. Very true.
That's how it goes.
And where do you go after the restaurant industry, and then what made you want to try something different?
Oh man, that's so I have a background in restaurants, and I'll tell you, people feel like that's kind of a glamorous industry because they're like, oh, it'd be so great to own a restaurant. You walk in, you sit down, and you get your drinks, or you give away desserts or whatever. Let me tell you, there is I would struggle. First of all, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. But I would struggle to think of another industry that has a higher rate of failure than that, right? Like, we all see Hell's Kitchen or something like that, but we're not all Gordon Ramsay, right? He's got the skill, the name, the connections, the background, and now obviously the fame to basically walk into a restaurant, and that's going to be. He does that for a living, as a matter of fact. Restaurant nightmares or whatever the thing is. He'll walk in and go, "Oh, this restaurant's horrible. Look, it's got cockroaches and everything. We're going to make it a success." And next thing you know, by the end of the episode, it's like successful and stuff, and you're like, "Well, yeah, but you have the ability to do that." Any other restaurant with roaches and stuff, it's not going to do that well. Trust me. But no, what ended up happening was. There was a real estate group that had an open space, and they had already a tenant in there for whatever reason, I never got to know, the tenant backed out and they had basically already finished the spot. And I had a storage unit full of restaurant equipment.
There you go.
It's a whole other story for another time. But I had a restaurant set of equipment in the storage unit. And so the company kept calling me and, are you interested? Are you interested? And I was like, no. I know how hard it is. I know what it takes. I know the type of investment that you'd have to make, and it doesn't make sense. And eventually they just kind of whittled down the monthly rent and just kept going down and going down and going down. And it's not like this A+ level strip mall or anything like that. The location was difficult, and that was part of my apprehension, of course. But as we continued down that path, it got to the point where the numbers made sense, and I knew that you didn't have to have like this giant staff or anything like that. And the type of cuisine was fairly safe here for Dallas, right? And who doesn't love a good margarita?
True.
Especially when it's a little stronger than usual.
Oh, yeah.
So we did that, of course, to make sure that we had some foot traffic going. And so lo and behold, we took the plunge, jumped in, put in a lot of sweat equity, and then I, obviously funded the rest of it. And then there was one key concept that I didn't see in too many places, which was a playground for kids.
Yeah.
So most places that you go to, especially with Tex-Mex in them, it's a sit-down restaurant, and there might be a patio, but there's not like a playground. And so there was a drive-through area that we repurposed and put a bunch of playground equipment out there and sunk it in like 4 feet in cement, so like nothing could get through there.
Yeah.
And then we turfed it all out really nice, and then put a fence around it, and then people can now come in and go, hey, go play on this stuff, and it's totally childproof. Go play on this stuff and do your stuff and leave me alone. I'm going to sit here and have a nice, dinner with the rest of the family or whatever. So I think that was a great hook. The final secret sauce component is just having a general manager that treats it like it's his own, right? And we have a fantastic general manager. And anybody who goes over to Carrollton, go to La Vista and talk to Henry. You will absolutely fall in love with him. He's charismatic. He's wonderful, totally customer service oriented. You just can't say enough about him. He's been with us for about 8 years now.
Oh, awesome.
And just, you talk about a relationship where you have somebody who alleviates headaches for you. That's ideally what you want to do. So I would definitely give him all of the credit for the success, especially going through COVID, right? Like so many businesses just fell off the map because social distancing. We'd be violating right now, you and I.
Yeah.
So it was interesting during that time, when there was nothing coming in or going out. He did whatever it took. He was like, I'm going to be here and I'm going to start creating to-go orders, and I will wrap myself up in mask and cellophane and whatever I need to do. And then Texas repealed the law of liquor to go.
Nice.
And you're not putting that genie back in the bottle.
True.
Once it's out. So they're like, you mean we can sell liquor to go?
Yeah.
And so then that also helped out. But like I said, Henry just absolutely took the burden on his shoulders and kept that restaurant going. And here we are post-COVID. And so, like I said, I'm not going to take the credit. I use my platform, as I always do for my teams, to advocate for their wins. Same thing goes with Henry, right? Yeah. Like, I would advocate for him so much. I mean, just such a fantastic job. So once you have that type of relationship with someone, especially somebody that you have a business, relationship with, the trust is there. Just the mutual admiration is there. It makes working a lot easier with people when you have that type of a simple context and simple understanding between you two.
Definitely.
Right? If you're not second guessing somebody all the time, then there's and then they feel empowered and they feel engaged and they feel like, hey, I can make decisions and stuff. And so one day I did ask him, I was like, Henry, if you ever think about going somewhere else, he's like, well, what would I do that for? He goes, yeah, I could get more money. He goes, I could be on the market. He goes, but then I'm going to have either corporate screaming down my neck about yada, 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 or why the numbers dipped or they didn't dip or they go, whatever it is, or the staff, and then there's going to be all kinds of additional challenges, we'll call them. He goes, or here, I'm happy. I have peace of mind. I have a great relationship with you. Is it like, Hell's Kitchen or something? No, it's not. I mean, it doesn't have all that glamour to it, but it meets all the needs, right? And so that's kind of how that ended up happening, much to my wife's dismay.
Really?
Well, I mean, at first I was spending a lot of time there, trying to get everything going and stuff.
So how many days a week are you open again?
7 days a week,
Yep,
like
that'll
always.
do it.
I'll tell Henry, he'll be like, hey, you're going to close for the 4th of July? No. He's like, no, we have a wonderful view. We can see all the fireworks. That show's here. They're like, okay,
Perfect.
man. I don't argue with that.
Hell yeah.
So that's kind of how that came to be.
And what was the biggest, most difficult part of that? Because I know it's one of the most toughest industries. Like, what's the key to success in addition to the ones that you already noted?
So from a business perspective, the formula is very, very public. They'll say you've got to have at least 6 months of payroll in the bank. You've got to have at least 6 months of rent in the bank. So there's all these things that make sense from a business perspective. And I don't argue that. You do. You can't be a person. There's a lot of aspiring restaurateurs that want to come out and say, you know what I'll do? I will get my finish out money and I'll finish my restaurant early, and then I will spend 2 or 3 or even 6 months generating revenue, and then that will be my cushion. It doesn't work that way, because you're going to go 2, 3, maybe 4 years without a lot of foot traffic. Honestly.
Really?
Oh, you go a long time. That's why they say the magic point for restaurants is 5 years. Nobody knows what it is, but when you're in it, you realize that what's happening is you're changing the habits of that community around you, right? You're not the new restaurant anymore where people are like, well, let's go try this place out. Well, we tried it out. Great. Now we'll go back to my favorite restaurant. Yeah. Now you are that favorite restaurant where your habits have changed and you're like, what do you want to do? Is it a La Vista night? Let's go, or hey, I feel like a margarita, well, let's go down the list. Or they're showing this game. Now you've changed that habit in the community, right? After 5 years and stuff. And that's what's important there. But if you don't have the financial backing and you don't have a good plan in place and you don't have the understanding of what is the appropriate amount of supply that you are going to be ordering, if you don't have the consistency with your food, with your drinks, with your recipes, if you're changing things all the time, the public won't know what to expect out of you, good, bad, or indifferent. They won't make it a habit, and then you won't survive, right? And so now you're going back to your finances. So that formula is there. If I had to tell you what the toughest part was, you don't take everything personally. Yeah. So in the beginning, Yelp comes to you and they're like, hey, guess what? For $275 a month, I can raise you 1 full star. And so, how do you do that? Well, of course, you control the platform. You can do whatever you want.
Sounds like bribery.
Right. It sounds like, but on the flip side of that, people utilize that against you. So there'll be competitors that'll come in and they'll say, oh, this was so bad that I ended up having to take, Tums, antacid, or whatever it was. And it's like, well, why did you show up with that in the first place? That doesn't make sense. Why would you go to dinner with that? I don't go to dinner with, antacid or anything like that. Or people who get mad for whatever reason. There are people who just have had a bad day. They got cut off in traffic, or maybe they didn't get that promotion. They'll come in, how dare you? This is the worst sauce I ever had, And then, agnostic of all that, don't read intent into it. There could be people who just have different flavors and taste buds, right? One table, I remember very specifically, I had one table that was like, this is the blandest hot sauce I've ever had. The next table was like, this is so spicy. How dare you? You're gonna,
really?
Yeah. I mean, they were back to back in one of these booths. I'll never forget that. And that at that point, I was participating a lot in the day-to-day operations and having staff meetings, and I fancied myself a good leader, and I felt I could invigorate the crowd and the team and the staff and everything. And then I realized just how important it is to have that dedicated GM there that really can do all that stuff. And that's why I give him so much credit, right? Because he took all of that headache off of my back, and he learned exactly how to deal with that. And there's always colorful characters, whether it's the public or the staff in that industry. When you learn not to take all that stuff personally, and you make sure that your ego is not so invested in everybody knowing you're the owner or whatever. And I'm a fairly private person. I don't really want a crowd around me or anything like that. So that part for me was easy. I don't need to walk in and everybody, hurrah, it's not cheers or anything like that. Norm. But once I got that out of the way, then it was fine. Then it was a lot easier. I was distributing the responsibility among myself and Henry, and working together, and then the staff became happy and they were engaged and they started participating in either marketing or spreading the word or anything like that. And I learned to ignore anything that was coming out on Yelp or Facebook or whatever platform people had, because look, people are gonna vocalize their anger, or they're more than likely they're going to vocalize something negative before they do something positive. I mean, any company will tell you that, when you get into surveys or something like that.
It's kind of depressing about humanity. It's like, if you talk to you look at the statistics on how do people share data, if you have the best experience in your life with a restaurant or a business or anything, they will on average tell like 0.93 people.
And they're usually sitting across from you.
Yeah.
Man, that was good.
Right?
Great, let's go.
But if you have a bad experience, on average, they'll tell 7 people.
Yeah. Yeah,
Oh, it's
crazy.
insane.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And the companies too, right? So
Oh, yeah.
corporate America is no different in that aspect. When somebody, your HR, your people operations department will say, we're sending out a survey at the end of the month. Let us know how things are. And you as a leader, you're like, guys, give that survey back because that's how we learn. Are we doing the right thing? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? Is there something we should change? Should the approach be something different? More than likely, people are like, I'm happy. I don't have anything to really share.
Yeah.
But if somebody didn't like, and I don't even want to give an example, but whatever it is, they'll be like, and then what have you have this long paragraph and they're like, you're running out of characters. It's a 10,000 character submission form and you run out of that. And then, so yeah, that's the toughest part, I would say, when it comes to that. But from my own personal experience, I believe diversification is important. And I believe, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So, kind of threw caution to the wind and did that.
Well, and out of curiosity, how's marketing work from that perspective? Because
word of mouth.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. I did try several different avenues whether it was ad pages or coupons or anything like that, and you just realize again, can't take things personally, but the public will not only take coupons that are expired, promotions that are expired, promotions that shouldn't be combined with other promotions. They will do everything to optimize that.
Oh, geez.
It's just crazy. It's crazy how society works. They put all of their effort into these things to try and leverage it instead of just being smart and doing something different,
Yeah. Oh,
I didn't phrase that correctly, but
no.
Nonetheless,
there are people out there that are the reason why they have a dictionary of small font at the very bottom of every single coupon.
Yeah, and that's how it is. And it could be something that's expired 7-8 months. But I didn't see those as the ones that move the needle either, because your investment into that ad and that promotion, plus the profit that you're losing, plus when people come in and take advantage of it, plus when they compound it with something that's already going on, like a happy hour special, an appetizer special, whatever it is, eventually you're like, I'm not sure if that really works.
Really?
The best, honestly, the best advertisement is word of mouth, pleasant experience.
It's kind of funny because other industries like JCPenney, they grew to their biggest prominence. Like everyone knew them for the coupons and like the demographics of who loved JCPenney back in the day. Means the gals at home were cutting the coupons. They love that promotion. And they actually had that, this former CEO of Apple went over there years ago, and they say he destroyed the company temporarily because he got rid of that promo. He said, we're just going to have fair prices, everything when you come in.
Right.
They hated it, but they love the coupons.
If you live and die by that, though, you'll live and die by that.
But for your instance, for your restaurant, it didn't work at all, it sounds like. Or actually negative. It worked,
but for me, I was like, what's the net takeaway, And then there was... When you have the larger chains with the name recognition and the streamlined operations, I think that it works because there's a lot more infrastructure and support going into determining like what you should be doing and what moves the needle and how much, right? Is it a 50% off day or is it a 10% off day? So there is something out there for it. I just didn't have that sweet spot. I didn't tune it to that point. And then the staff, since it was small, they're like, man, I have to keep up with these coupons and stuff and blah, blah, blah. And so then they get upset. You got to turn the coupons at the end of the day because if not, then how do I know you're not just giving discounts to your friends and marketing it as a coupon? Like, there's a lot of stuff there that goes into it. So the overhead that goes into it for a small shop like that may not be worth it. You know, and that's a determination that you make as an individual. Maybe I'm losing out on something out there. I don't know. I just did see that providing somebody a really good experience with fresh ingredients. I mean, I'm going to sound like a commercial now.
Better ingredients, better pizza. Wait, what?
I know. No, but if you provide somebody a really good experience with fresh ingredients, not frozen stuff, if the drinks are good, and that's what people look for, they don't want to get like this tiny little sip and stuff.
Precisely.
And it's just an enjoyable experience. And then you personalize it. That's something that our staff does really well. When you come to the restaurant, it's not an accident, right? Like you're hidden back behind a bank in the shopping center way back over here in the corner. So people don't stumble upon it. It's not like we're at the major intersection of blank and blank. So when people show up there, that's what they're there for. And if you're a regular, the staff will know that. And there was nothing that was ever affirmatively said to get them to do this, but so many times they just know what you want.
Oh, yeah.
Because you go there and they're like, you're this guy, you're that guy.
Exactly.
And so like, pop, pop, and so that's kind of cool. You walk in and you sit down and they already have your drink ready, whether it's, your Jim Beam and Michelob Ultra or whatever it is, your Glenlivet or whatever it is that you're having.
Oh, yeah.
And there is something to be said there. Can you capture that lightning and put it in a bottle and attach it to a coupon? Probably not.
No.
And so then eventually you get somebody like Henry again that comes in and says, and now we're going to really customize your experience because I think that you should have your anniversary, birthday, whatever. Have something here,
Yeah.
And then as a community, you get to know these regulars, and then you find common interest. And whether you're all there going to watch the Olympics together or the World Cup or the soccer game or whatever it is, that you're going to watch, or you're going to get behind the home team and watch the Cowboys do this and do that. And we all show up. Eventually, there's a community and an ecosystem there. And then again, through that camaraderie and that experience is where you see success. I can't replicate that, and I don't think that I would ever want to go through that experience again.
No, I mean, that's
exhausting.
That's literally just grinding it out, getting those relationships going.
Grind it out.
And it's funny because every marketing company will tell you, oh, just spend a couple $100 on Facebook or LinkedIn ads. It'll change the world.
Yeah.
It's like, I've tried that a couple of times and look at the analytics. It's like, oh, yeah, 10,000 people saw us on LinkedIn. I'm like, really? Did that? Because so we did that for Topgolf, one of our cybersecurity events last year. I'm like, all right, I'll spend a couple $100 on LinkedIn ads. I'm like, all right, it's cool in terms of you could say where geographically, what kind of job titles. You could customize the target audience.
Right.
And it told me 10,200 people saw it. I'm like, then I look at the analytics. I'm like, how did you hear about this event? Because I have that in the the registration. Not a single person heard about it from LinkedIn. I was like, really, Microsoft? Really?
Yeah, I don't know.
Like,
I mean, where that information comes from, like they say, garbage in, garbage out. But my frustration would be the same way. I would boost an event on Facebook or something. It'd say 12,000 people saw it, and it'd be the same regulars. And I'd be like, oh, that's crickets,
Yeah.
So you're wondering, like, how do you move the needle? And you could change the amount of the discount, but I just didn't see anything there that I could emphatically hang my hat on. So kind of left that.
I always debate because, and then another interesting thing with all these different social media platforms, whether that's X, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, they all have the different definitions of, well, what's a view versus what's an impression. Did they see it for more than did they just scroll through their phone and they saw it for a tenth of a second?
Right.
Well, to me, I want.
Or if it was dropped on their feed and they just skipped it, or anything like that. And like I said, look, as being as humble as I don't know that stuff. I'll be honest. That's not. I couldn't give anybody advice on that. Which is why I'm in cybersecurity.
There you go.
That's what I know how to do. Did I get lucky? Probably. That's probably luck. Probably luck. Really good people that were there. The fact that I grew up in the city. I've been in Carrollton since my childhood. Funny. I'll see teachers there. My old wrestling coach. I'll see a bunch of different educators that from my past that are still active in the community. And it's just crazy when you see that younger version inside there somewhere. You're like, oh, I remember. It's usually through the eyes. The scariest one was where I walked around the corner one day on a very busy evening, and then I heard somebody go, Charlie, and I froze. I mean, it came back. It was my wrestling coach.
Really?
Yeah, I got yelled at all the time. Coaches correct you, and they correct you in some stern ways. And this guy's just amazing product coach, John Johnson. And he was a coach at R.L. Turner when I was wrestling there. But even the brief amount of time in the total of my life that I spent with him, I mean, that voice, right away I knew who it was. I turned around and he was standing right there. I was like, Coach, So it was really cool to see that. And then when other people who don't know that you're the owner come in, you start talking to them and they just happen to be there because they heard it was a great place. That's fantastic. And they're like, this is your place? Wow. So it's really cool.
I mean, you blend in perfectly. Like, first time I went to the restaurant, you're just chilling, hanging out, laid back.
Yeah, you were like, Mas agua.
Yeah,
you thought I was your busboy.
Yeah, donde.
Mas salsa here.
Yeah, mild, too caliente.
You son of...
What was it like vetting suppliers? 'Cause I know one of the biggest issues is, how do you get consistency with ingredients, and how do you get the best tasting ones? Or is that pretty simple?
It is because they usually utilize like a regional approach, right? So I'm the area manager over blank. And then you already know, it kind of sucks for the newer guys, but you already have some staple players, and you kind of know what they're going to charge, and you already know what their product is like, and you do get to do some sampling. And same thing with the beverage companies that provide your alcohol. There's not this crazy myriad of them, so that's not the swing there is not too big.
Mm-hmm.
It's not too big. Eventually, like I said, you want to take yourself out of that daily operational grind, because if you're going to be the guy that approves everything, then you're not.
Oh,
and
sure.
I never wanted
Yeah.
to give up my career. I never wanted to saddle the restaurant with my lifestyle or my career or anything like that. I knew that that was one of the biggest cardinal sins that most aspirational restaurant owners have. Is they're like, I used to go to auctions, and you meet people as you wait for whatever you're going to bid on. It could be a cooler, it could be an art piece, I don't know, whatever it is. And so eventually the conversation goes like this. So how'd you get into this? What do you have? And the person, when you hear this story, it just breaks your heart. Well, I went on vacation, and there was this really cool little bar on the beach of yada, yada, yada.
Oh,
and I thought, I could do that. And so then I went ahead and liquidated my 401k, and we quit our jobs. And you're just, the whole time your heart's just breaking, because you know how difficult this is. Like,
Yeah.
how difficult. And I don't have this, like I said, maybe it's because I was in Carrollton a long time, and we spread a lot of word of mouth and called a lot of friends. I don't know, but it's just really interesting, because when you go to these auctions and these things and you hear these stories, you're just like, oh gosh, and you really are pulling for the person. Oh, I hope this works out for you.
Yeah.
And now here they are at the auction. There was one that wanted to open up this, I don't know what it's called. It's a Brazilian something, Brazilian meat something.
Yeah.
And by chance, the auction place that was selling the equipment had this thing, and they told me the name, but I don't remember it now, where you put like an entire cow on it, like, and you can
Really?
just turn it, but it's got to be heavy duty, right? And it's got to be very specialized. So, I mean, it's not like a pizza oven or something. Well, pizza oven's big too. It's not like a beverage cooler or something. And I saw the price tag on it, and I was just like, gosh. And they were like, yeah, we sunk our savings into it. It's going to be so great, and we're going to love each other. And you're like, oh my gosh. It's tough, man. I mean, and, don't let that sway you from your dreams. If the service industry or food is your passion, I'm just a very pragmatic person, and I knew that the restaurant would have a better chance of survival and success if it was paying its own bills, and it wasn't about paying me, So, and I love cybersecurity. I mean, I love doing that. I enjoy it very much. I enjoy watching my career evolve. I enjoy participating. I enjoy learning. I never want to stop that. I'm a very curious person. I never want to leave that passion. So even today, we're talking about artificial intelligence, and we're talking about APIs, and you're talking about infrastructure as code, and you're talking about, and you can go on and on and on and on about all these things, and declarative scripts, and how you're going to do different things, and what's container security look like, and it can sound daunting, but when you have that curious spirit, then you just kind of prioritize it. Like, what matters to my company and what interests me, And can I spend some time learning that and understanding that? And where can I consume this? Is it on LinkedIn, or can I consume it on YouTube, or can I go to a different platform, or is there something special that I can do? And so it's good. It's good to do that. I think that it would be very similar to somebody who does investments. I couldn't tell you anything about investments.
Right.
I'm just like, gosh, I hope my 401k is doing okay.
Right.
But there are people who go out there and research it, and they know new companies, and they're like, if you want to be aggressive, here's what your mix should look like. And if you don't want to be aggressive, then here's what your mutual fund should, whatever it is. And they learn, and they have that passion and that curiosity for it, and that helps them succeed. When it comes from a sincere place, you're going to succeed. If you sincerely enjoy something, it's like they say, if you want to be successful, do something you love. The definition of success might differ, but nonetheless, So, and for me, I did not find myself in security. I gravitated toward it. I very much was pulled in that direction. And so then that never goes away, right? It's like loving Oreos.
Yeah, right?
You just don't get sick of it.
Would you ever want to open up a second location?
Oh, gosh.
What's kind of your future, your vision for the company?
Oh, man. I'm in security, Nick. I'm so risk adverse. I'll be honest, man. It's scary to me. I'd be lying if I told you that I didn't want to be successful. And even people in my neighborhood where I've lived, living in Frisco and now I live in Prosper, people are like, oh, yeah, I'd open up close by. And I'm like, oh, are you going to support it?
Yeah.
Because it's scary. And I just told you what it takes. So
I was going to say, especially if you look at just like the cost just to rent somewhere in Frisco, Prosper. I mean, I can't.
Anywhere. I don't know. Because Carrollton's not,
No. Like some of these restaurants, like in the Star? I would be
yeah, but
fascinated to hear what's their profit margins when their rent
different,
is.
too.
I mean, oh my gosh.
One of the things that aggravates me in that is that there's always an evolution when it comes to everything. Everything gets so sophisticated. There was a time when your rent was blank, and that's it. And then you started working out graduating rent, and then you started talking about your triple nets, and then you start talking about your costs.
And what's that for the folks at home?
So,
What are those two terms for the folks at home who might not be in the restaurant industry?
So your triple net costs are going to be the expenses that you incur that you have to pay for on top of just your base rent. And then as you look at graduated rent, you're talking about year over year having to pay more. Because the expectation that and this is how people get smart. The expectation that the landlords have is you're going to be successful. And the more successful you are, the more successful we should be. And so, it's a mutual thing. And then eventually that's not good enough. Eventually they're like, and now if you make more than X amount of dollars, depending on what you raise, let's call it $1 million a year. If you're generating more than $1 million, now 1% of that should come back to us. And you're like, oh, why?
Really?
What did you do for me? And so that's the thing is like, it's scary because there are people who dedicate their entire careers to this, and that's what they do for a living. And I'm not that guy. I'm not a real estate attorney. I'm not a rent attorney or anything like that. So I don't know what's right or wrong and stuff. And then now what they put into the riders is things like if we have an empty spot and everybody else pays for camp charges, which is like cleaning and maintenance, right? Yeah. Striping parking lots, cleaning it up, throwing some mulch down, trimming the trees, things like that. That should be a mutual community expense if you're in a strip mall. And if we're missing one, then we're just going to divvy that up among our existing clients. They're like, well, no, you should.
Really?
Yeah, and you're like, that's not cool. Like, that's not, So if you want that, if you have that passion, then you'll be willing to weather that headache.
Yeah.
That's not my passion. I'd love to say that I came up with all the recipes and it's just like Mom used to make, but I'm Colombian. It's not Mexican. So that's kind of it. So would I love the success and everything that's glamorous and wondrous that comes along with it? Yeah, I would. I mean, I didn't come from a lot, so I always have that hunger in me because that's the way I'm wired, is to try and be successful and have that energy. But do I really want to take time away from, the wonderful time I get to spend with my mother, with my children, with my wife? I've got 2 new puppies.
Oh, there you go.
I got 2 Cocker Spaniels that are crazy. So it's things like that you're like, at the end of the day, you don't want to be on your deathbed going, oh, I've got a great restaurant name, but I don't even know what my kid's favorite color is or something like that. You don't want to do that, And I want to be involved with them. I coach their soccer teams, and I'm involved in the community, and love my family, and that's how you want to spend some time. And my elderly mother lives with me now, so you get to spend time with her, and you just got to appreciate that while it's here. So if you dilute yourself so much to where your diversification is your priority and you're diluted all over the field, then no one area is ever going to receive an ample or an adequate amount of your attention or of your focus or anything like that. And you need that balance in your life. I'm okay with anything as long as you've got balance.
Oh yeah.
So that's a big part of it.
And then once the restaurant got up and running, where did you do cybersecurity, or where do you move from there?
In my career?
Yeah.
That never lost its focus. That's been a priority because that's the bread and butter, right? And that's the passion. And so in a cybersecurity perspective, you are always constantly learning, just learning. If you stop and say, great, we've got firewalls, everything's great. No, because then you got to start talking about, well, is there a better way to do perimeter security? Is there something? Have we ever really simplified the zero trust model? Is that something we can do now? Am I good at data classification? Is there any way that I can append my vulnerabilities and make a determination on how to make a better partnership with the business? Things like that. So that never stops. If I had to describe it, I would tell you the restaurant was a hobby. Yeah. And the career is the primary focus. Because I love the career very much. And so for me, when the restaurant was doing well and it was, taking care of its own self, I was very much focused on what else is happening out there, right? You gravitate away from some of these pillars in security that have been around a while, like networking and endpoints and identity management, and you start looking at what's the new horizon in vulnerability management or something like that, you know? And I asked quite a few experts, you know, well, let's walk through vulnerability management. And they're like, well, it is what it is. It hasn't changed in 20 years. And I was like, why? That doesn't make any sense. Like, I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I realized that many of the business units, their pain points. Remember, you said earlier that CEOs feel like security is there to make your job harder and it's a pain in the butt. Well, it's not just the executive leadership. I mean, if you've got application developers, or if you've got site reliability engineers, or you've got a variety of other different technical teams that are doing something. They're either going to be putting in a new feature, a new function, they're rolling something out that's more competitive, anything that's lucrative. They're like, I want to spend my time doing that and not fixing a vulnerability that you have, you know? And so eventually what ends up happening, especially with application security, is they start really challenging you. Well, that's not really a critical vulnerability. It's only a critical under these circumstances, only when it's predicated on this information, right? Or if it's in this area and has access to this information, or data, I should say. And I realized that what would be really beneficial and would gain a lot of traction with the business units is if I could give them a very transparent view of where they were best served spending their time and money. Okay, I've got a developer. Should he be creating a new feature or should he be fixing this thing over here, right? And so I worked with my team and we started coming up with a weighting system and a scoring system to say, okay, this thing is or is not internet facing. If it's not internet facing, let's take it down blank %.
And then which team was this, or what company was that?
So this was working at the U.S. Bank.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So we started looking at it because, you know, you want to provide bang for your buck, you know, and that term can transcend just, you know, any industry. And so and we had so many application development teams, and you had a community of, I think at the time they were gravitating around 10,000 developers in that. You know, so you're talking about a large community, you know, and so you want to understand. I've got, you know, 50 million moderate vulnerabilities. Well, should I be addressing those, or should I be addressing my features and my functionality? Or should I be re-architecting the whole thing, right? Maybe this is, you know, some sort of platform that really needs to be, you know, deprecated and you move on. But anyway, when you look and start understanding that there are data points that are constantly present and that you can utilize and leverage to be able to tell somebody this really is worth your while, then they'll appreciate them and be like, okay, great, finally, now I can tell, right? So if you're like, oh, there's a log4j file that was in, I was like, oh, log4j, you know, that's the reaction they have. And you're like, but if you look at it and you're like, okay, well, this is on a developer machine in a sandbox. The actual code doesn't employ this library. It's not really used, you know. It's not a mission critical asset. The information that's on it is public information. I mean, whatever, right? When you start classifying some of these absolutes and you have a weighting mechanism there, you can come back and say, we've rescored this critical vulnerability that's known as log4j. And it's really a moderate, or, you know, it might be low, or maybe there's even a new category you create, which is just informational. Maybe it's just so low, it's not even worth it, you know? So that's the kind of stuff that you start looking at and start trying to reimagine, and you start trying to work into your day-to-day operations so you can optimize what your teams are doing. And it's also something that helps nurture the curiosity of your teams. Like, now they're engaged. Oh, that's cool, man. Like, what else could we look at? You know, how else could we append this? How do we automate that? You know, is there a way to come up with a system that actually helps us get through this a lot faster by classifying these in a certain way and prioritizing? So there's a lot of stuff there. And, you know, some companies have done a really good job. Trellix is a company that's done a good job looking into that. They have a wonderful AI-based approach to what they do. That helps use data aggregation to understand vulnerabilities better in your environment better, and the prioritization, and then removing alerts and notifications. There's just a lot of stuff, right? So there's these wonderful, incredibly talented people across the industry that come up with this. And it's our job just to kind of learn it and be able to speak to it intelligently, you know? And so you stand on the shoulders of them, but, you know, it's really cool that you can go out there and then give guidance to the business units and be able to provide them good insight on where they would be spending their resources the best.
That's probably one of the biggest stark contrasts when you look at how businesses have evolved throughout the years with security. I mean, back in the day, you had the Wells Fargo, horse and buggy, and you have a guy riding shotgun, which is where the term come from. They had a shotgun physically, and that was the big threats. Is all physical.
Yeah.
Now banks, I mean, granted, there's still gunpoint, robberies.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But if you look at where is all the money being stolen from, where's the biggest vulnerabilities? It's all cybersecurity.
Yeah. You can even manifest through cybersecurity physical threats, right? Because we look at critical infrastructure,
Yeah.
and like all things in security boil back down to your CIA triad, right? Confidentiality, integrity, and availability, right?
Yep.
So confidentiality, maybe I don't want, in some of these secrets or some of these things, integrity is I don't want you messing with something from the way I originated, the way I have it. Have you changed the fidelity of what I've got, or have you changed the composition of what I've got? This is not how I designed it. Now it's doing something different. It's calling out to something, beaconing somewhere, like whatever it is. And then availability is if I can't even get to it, then what's the point? It's been compromised. Like I can't do what I do for a living because my systems or my technology is not available. So yeah, I mean, if you can even do that through infrastructure or through anything, and there's threat actors. It's a cops and robbers game all the time.
Absolutely.
And that goes back to our original point, which was the steam will come out some, or you'll be able to have a little bit of decompression if people understand that you can't bat 1,000 all the time. And I think that's the brave new world that we're going into. Because you didn't name me a company that hasn't really been breached or affected, or I mean, it's like in every industry, and the big names too, right? Like, remember when it happened to Home Depot or Target, and people, oh my gosh, I can't believe, At one time, Yahoo had the biggest breach in history, and
AT&T, right? All the phone records, all the text messages,
and now it comes out all the time.
Yeah,
a lot of people make announcements, and they're like, we discovered, back in December, blah 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 happened, 25 million records exposed.
Yeah, and now they have to too, because I know they passed that law. Was it 3 or 4 fiscal quarters ago, where if you're publicly traded, you got to tell the SEC, like, hey, we had this breach. So
any material events you have to disclose. There's been a couple of executive orders that are like that, and the executive orders are even going further than saying you have to disclose things. Now they're saying, thou shalt be responsible with cybersecurity, and you have to up your game. There's a lot of different things that are going on out there, and that's the direction they're all going to go in, right? So if you call it a mandate for federal entities or for any federal business partners, it doesn't matter, because that's only going to set the trend or the bar for what the rest of the industry has to do.
A lot of people swear by the NIST. I mean, they follow it like it's a religion.
Yeah, but like it's one of those things where they say there's real good cybersecurity practitioners. It's really interesting because people confuse compliance with security. So they're like, well, I got all the areas of MITRE kill chain, attack chain covered. So I win my security bingo. And it's like, that's not how it works. Like,
but Johnny, I checked the box.
Right. And so you're like, no, that's not how it doesn't work that way. And so many companies, they do look at it as, are we compliant? Is that good enough?
Yeah.
If it's good enough, then let's just keep moving on. And the truth is, no, man, it's not that. Do you want to be mindful about your security and really be proactive in your approach? Because being reactive is exhausting. And I tell people that all the time. When you have a tactical, reactive response to everything, it's exhausting, and that's really where cybersecurity gets a bad name. If you put it in sports terms, you've got a football game, right? Your wide receiver is going to run out, and they know what they're doing. I'm going to turn left here, and I'm going to turn right there, and I'm going to stop and act like this, and I'm going to go. And they're ready to go. They've got their route picked out. The defensive back, or the cornerback, they don't. They have to react to everything you do, and that most often is the most athletic person on the field, because they've got to be able to shadow you, your speed, your moves, your velocity, your turn, right? Like all your ability to do all this stuff, and that's exhausting. And eventually a defense is exhausted, right? Even though an offense and defense are on the field at the same amount of time as they go down the road, the offense is still looking fresh. And they're like, we're running because we know what we're going to do, and we don't have to be exhausted mentally thinking about it. But you, from a physical and a mental perspective, you're like, oh, where do you go? What is it? You're stressing out. Same thing with security. If that's the way that you're going to operate security, you're going to be like, hey, I'm compliant, and I check all these boxes and that's it. And then suddenly has something key off somewhere, and you're running, and I don't have a routine for this, and what do I do? You got to have that proactive mentality to it. You got to know, what questions are you going to ask? What's the cadence of your reporting? What are you going to give back? When is it going to happen? What's your plan B? What if that doesn't work? Then what do you do? How do you escalate? Who's involved? Like who represents what? How are you going to reach? Do
you have a remediation team? Do you have to outsource it? What's that like? What's your SLAs?
There's so much stuff. Even the person who quarterbacks all that stuff. If you don't have that plan, And people will never appreciate that until they need it.
Oh, true. Exactly.
And once you need it, it's just like it's an oh shit moment. Am I allowed to cuss?
Yeah. Of course. Yeah. Say whatever you want.
Yeah, no. But it's one of those moments. And that's when you realize the value. That's why it's very difficult at times, because there is no, I shouldn't say there is no, but most people don't feel there's an ROI on security.
Oh no, a lot of businesses just see it as a sunk cost.
Yeah,
especially when they don't see.
What's the ROI? I haven't had a breach. What's the problem?
Yeah,
the day you do.
We didn't lose any wire transfers this fiscal quarter. We're fine. Everyone got paid.
Or ransomware. Nobody took our. And the second it happens, I had a very good friend of mine. I went to go to the MyTech headquarters over in San Diego. What was it? In February, maybe February or March. I can't remember now. But anyway, it was at the beginning of the year, the first quarter. And as I'm getting off the plane, one of a very good friend of mine is like, hey, I need some advice. Okay, great. What's up? Because I thought this was a social call.
Yeah.
Well, my company just got this email, and it was ransomware.
Oh, jeez.
And it was, what do I do? I was like, what do you mean, what do you do? I'm like, you're the director over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we're cheap and we don't da-da-da-da-da. It was a restaurant chain. I'm not going to mention any names or anything like that.
Let me guess, they didn't have backups.
They didn't have a plan. I mean, it wasn't anything. Like, what would you, it was a what would you do?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to grab my luggage and typing with one hand, and I'm in the Uber, and I just basically batted out an incident response plan for him right there on the fly.
Nice.
And I was like, but this is like that's what you want, somebody who knows how to do that. You want that. And they were like, well, what else? And I was like, do you have relationships with local law enforcement? Do you know who your FBI field office is? Like anything like that. Well, no. Why would I need that? I don't need that. We don't want this getting any bigger. Well, you can save yourself a lot of time. If the FBI has a profile, on the group, and there's indicators of who the group is, or if they identify themselves, then there's some groups where they're going to be like, they're not going to release this. They just want the money, and they're just going to take off, and good luck to you. Yeah. And there are some groups who are releasing. Now, they're not going to play ball with them, but they just need to understand, like, what is the scope and what's the status right now. Oh, yeah. And so that's the deal. It's like companies will never see that until it's too late. And if you decide that's when and that's why industries that are regulated have so much overhead, because there's larger entities there that say you will do this and you will report it. Oh, yeah. And even more so now, there are new stipulations in place that say even if you weren't a part of this scope, right? Do you have that contingency plan? Like, what would you have done? Yeah. So start taking a look at it and tell me if this did threaten one of your mission critical assets, or if there was a palpable risk or threat or event, what would your plan have been? And at the beginning, you had that cold water moment where you're like, you want me to speculate on something that never happened? Yeah. And then you realize, oh, you just want me to be ready is really what it is.
Precisely.
So when those came out, that's kind of how we went. But it's interesting. Like I said, I stand by my assertion that we're not going to correct.
No.
Security's not going anywhere.
Thankfully, the industry's kind of catching up in terms of most of these security companies are getting better at being able to pump out reports to make CIOs and CEOs and CFOs happy in terms of be like, hey, we have this email security solution. Here's all the emails that we blocked that are malicious. Here's some that are ransomware. Here's just random spam. So thankfully, they're trying to catch up because, again, they know some folks want to see some data. Like, again, you can't quantify, be like, we blocked this guy, and this guy, historically speaking, they would cost you, $10 million lost revenue. It's not getting to that point yet. That'd be pretty cool, but
you're on the right track, and it takes thought leaders. It takes thought leaders to be that. So look, that's what separates when you're looking for executive leadership in the cybersecurity realm. That's what separates the really good ones, the ones that have that content. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say from anybody that's bad, but let's just say that people rise, right? Yeah. They rise to the top. When you are understanding what metrics are relevant and are useful in a cybersecurity program, then you can be a lot of benefit. You're a great asset to your company, and that's something that I would really urge security practitioners out there who are wondering how to distinguish themselves. Look into that. That's a big portion of it. Mm-hmm. Almost as big as mindful management, right? Because you don't want to lead a team and be a jerk about it.
True.
But if you can say these metrics are important and this is how you should measure your program, one, and how you should steer your program, two. because everything else is just counting widgets, as we like to say. Guess what? I closed 12 tickets. Well, is that good?
Yeah.
Guess what? I'm 27% safer. Is that a lot or a little? Like, what does that mean? What's the impact? Can you tell me what the benefit is there? Because when you're at that table that we work so hard to get a seat at, you have other business leaders who are saying marketing is up by 27%, which translates into blank amount of dollars, and and you're like, oh crap, Well, you need to come with something which is just as useful, right? And so if you're going to have a seat at that table, you'd better put your thinking cap on and be able to say, here are my metrics that matter, right? The amount, if we talked about this earlier, the amount of vulnerabilities that have patches out there that are 6 months or older are 4% down, 12% down, 18% down, whatever. And that's important because we shouldn't have any vulnerabilities out there that have patches. Just apply the patches,
exactly.
Or go through your testing process, obviously, and change management and apply the patches. Or even your phishing campaigns. Well, our click rate is within reason. What's within reason? Like, did you establish that? Do you know what it is? Is it 3%? Is it 8%? Are you going over 10%? Should that matter? Should that matter to the board? Yes, because then that tells you that your security awareness program is not working. And you have people out there who are going to click any link.
Oh, gosh,
and they're like, click here quickly, if you want to see savings in your...
Get an iTunes gift card.
Yeah, so anything like that. But like I said, if you want to be a mindful leader, and I really think that the biggest gap right now are cybersecurity executive leaders that have those soft skills, that have the ability to lead teams, that have the ability to engage, that are willing to roll their sleeves up and say, in our ecosystem here, these are the metrics that matter, and put your head into it. It shouldn't just be something that you study for a quiz, or you should have that passion and be ready to, bring your team up and get them ready to be leaders and to be engaged and to do something wonderful. So that matters. And when you go in an interview, it's hard to go through all that stuff. You're just trying to put your best foot forward and not seem like you're too crazy. But there are things like that distinguish you as a good leader and distinguish you as an asset to your company, and that you really should work on. So,
And then what is MyTech Systems, and what made you choose the company?
So MyTech Systems is an identity. They're in the identity industry, in the identity space. Their primary footprint started off in Europe. And so basically what it is when you're going to be depositing a check online, say for instance, and they span a lot more than just this, but we'll start off with this portion. If you're going to put a check, if you've got a check and you're going to deposit it online, you want to validate that check is good. And there are several different data points there that can help to validate that and provide that non-repudiation that you need, so the bank is willing to deposit it. Well, MyTech has a platform that takes that data or that information and goes out and verifies it, right, to an extent. And they use different data points to make sure that it works the way that it's supposed to, or that it's valid. So the look at it is your address matching up with your name. If you take a look at it, you can look at a different database and determine, is this the correct routing number for the bank? Is this the correct account number? And so at the end of the day, it takes this, and to a certain percentage, it says, I'm 99% that this is accurate, right? If I wrote a check and it said, Charles Topping, and I live in Prosper, but the bank is, Chase Bank. It's like these things don't match up. This doesn't look right. And you can take a look. You can even access, utility bills database to show the correct address and things like that. So in Europe, that information is a lot more cohesive, and that's where they started off. Eventually, where they're going and what they're working on right now is cutting edge technology to utilize biometrics to validate your identity.
Really?
So again, you have to understand what a geographical rule is. So in Europe, if you're going to make an online bet, for instance, I got to prove to you that I'm the owner of this credit card, right? And so you're going to submit certain pieces of information, whether it's your face, your fingerprint, you can submit, your state issued ID or whatever it is to validate that you own that card. Now,
Really?
in the U.S., we don't have that, right? Like, if you're my sugar daddy and I want to get something online, I'm just going to use your credit card.
That's true. Why did you do that? Why did you do that last month? If you went above your budget, how dare you?
What a horrible example.
Yeah.
No, but in Europe it's different. And again, you have to understand. And then of course you also have to understand the responsibility with utilizing the information of somebody who is a resident of the EU, right?
So do they have a thumb? Like I know, like back in the day, like you get the little funny, USB
Well, no, it's not
spanner.
that. But they use biometrics, right? And
so camera.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
so the thumbprint falls under biometrics, but
no one really uses it.
You can utilize. And then on the opposite side of that, you also want to make a determination to a high degree of certainty that you're not sending me something fake, like a deep fake, right?
That's true.
So now, because there's this case in China where that ended up happening, right?
Really?
Yeah. So there's things like that end up happening. And so not only do you want to be able to utilize the technology to validate this and do it in a really cool, sexy and glamorous, but be able to say, hey, your voice recognition tells me it's you, whether if we can have the ability to do an iris scan or if it's a geometric print of your face or a template of your face or something like that, So whatever it is,
that's really hard. I know there's an example like some kid was pranking a gym teacher in the United States a couple months ago, and they made a fake recording to make the gym teacher look evil and terrible.
Yeah.
Got the teacher fired. The FBI had to come in with, of course, it's a fancy term for the audio engineer to actually tell you the science behind it, but they used their own tech. They were able to find, oh no, AI generated that.
Right, exactly.
And that was just a kid in high school.
Have you not seen all the reels or the shorts or whatever they call them on YouTube? I don't know what the kids call them. Whatever they have on YouTube of Keanu Reeves doing all this crazy stuff.
Yeah, that dude, yeah.
And it's not him. Yeah. But it's like that. That's the whole thing. Is like those are called deep fakes.
Yeah.
There are certain telltale signs that you can utilize to determine using learning models whether it is a deep fake or whether it's something that's original. And so that's what my tech is doing is they're utilizing these biometrics to try and establish non-repudiation for something which is a good transaction or transactional exchange. So that's a part of it. And so they also work in, like they call it check fraud defender. So they make sure that what I mentioned earlier, that, you don't have a fraudulent check or something like that you try to use to deposit. They utilize it for other different reasons in identity space. So if you want to verify, Nick Topping's identity, if you're, let's say you're Verizon, right? And we're going to partner with Verizon, and Verizon is going to utilize our technology to make sure that you are who you say you are, so that they don't have to go do that, so that you can open up an account and take advantage of the brand new iPhone, blah, 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 or Galaxy, whatever it is that your flavor is. So when you start thinking about the use cases that exist for non-repudiation in identity, then you realize that's really important. I mean, even governments are going to do it, right? Like, so you're going to join the army. How do I know that's really you and not somebody, whatever it is. So there's a lot of use cases there all over the world. And then the responsibility that entails with utilizing your PII or anything that's important. And the same thing's true, validating that, you're putting in correct funds and not committing fraud. And, there's just a ton of use cases there, and they're growing rapidly. Interestingly enough, they're a public company, which is a little bit of a rare breed to have a technology company that does this, being successful and working the way that they are. So the challenge is there. The field is different. Because I was working fintech before, and now when you start taking a look at artificial intelligence and like what you can and can't do with it, so the good and the bad that comes along with that, inclusive of utilizing those large learning models, right? So often they say, just because you can do it doesn't mean you should do it. So people are like, oh, we want to use these data sets and put them into the learning models and be able to utilize them for blah, 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 blah. What's the risk, Charles? And I'd be like, well, you could have data poisoning. Like you could have you heard of these attorneys that submitted cases to judges, like in New York?
Yeah.
This didn't have, I think it was out of Colombia, as a matter of fact.
ChatGPT?
Yeah, where it was like, I think it was an airplane case, personal injury case for an airplane, and they cited all these cases, and it was like, that never happened. And I was like, did you check your, so when you wonder about like what the downside is of all this wonderful technology that makes our lives so easy, or makes it easier, these are the things that you have to look out for. And unfortunately, they do fall under the vein of cybersecurity, right? Because we have to validate and we have to make sure it's not data poisoning and there's not anything that's biased, right? You have to work against that. And you don't want to, depending on the flavor of technology that you're utilizing for AI, you don't want certain things going out there and being scraped, right? Or being utilized to enhance their data models and their learning and stuff. I think Slack just came out with something like that. Where they started off with, nope, these are on-prem servers and you don't have to worry about it. We'll never scrape your data. And then very quietly, one day they issued a statement to where they're like, if you don't want us doing this, you have to tell us. You have to take that affirmative. But they didn't like just notify. They were just like, if you don't want to do it, you have to take the action. And if you weren't really paying attention to these updates and what the releases were, it could have just gone by, And so it's things like that. So So there's a lot that comes along with it, as you look at it. But everything is it's just a constant evolution and learning how to secure it. Whether it's blockchain or I mentioned infrastructure as code earlier, and talking about declarative scripting versus imperative, and I mean, just on and on and on. Like, we could talk for hours about what's next on the cutting edge technology chain, and but people gravitate around the deep fakes and the biometrics. I think there's a novelty to it, kind of sounding sexy and cool. But it's true. I mean, you can't negate the fact that it's there.
I mean, especially when it comes to political and corporate espionage. Like, let's say if you're one electronics company, well, one bad speech or one public statement that's bad by Tim Cook, you could make their stock drop like a rock.
Well,
like just one video.
Let's if you really want to go exponential, what if I did something really nefarious with Taylor Swift's image and her voice? Or better yet, what if I didn't do something nefarious, but it's not part of her brand? If I said, hey, come on down here to Crazy Charlie's mattress sale, and we'll give you a free set of pots for every 10 mattresses. I don't know, whatever that you buy. And then one day Taylor Swift says, I didn't. Then I've got a huge lawsuit on my hands. And then the other portion of it is, if I happen to have recognition software that has a sampling of her voice, and I'm storing it, I can make it say and do different things.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, and we haven't really gone into those areas to establish really good policy around that. So what does that mean?
You used to need a lot of data in order to fake someone's voice or their video.
Right.
Now you just need a little bit.
Or you could be Rich Little, and just do
True.
Do it yourself. But you're right, because you've got these models that just have the ability to just exponentially learn from their own mistakes.
And there's some voice technology where they can make it sound just like the person. Like, there's a couple months where every one of my commercials on the YouTube was by a nefarious company, and they used a voice actor who sounded exactly like Joe Rogan. In the same, not just the same voice, but the same cadence of his speech too. And
some people have a talent for that. I mean, they're really good at that. And
then sometimes it's a computer doing it. And it's just fascinating to see how fast it's coming along, how much it's evolving.
Yeah, the neural networks that they utilize for that, and even more so when you look at cryptography, there's these supercomputers, and you're sitting there going, oh, we used to say that you would be able to hack through a password or, relieve the obfuscation of a password within X amount of time. Not with these supercomputers now, and you have to start wondering, like, well, okay, what are we going to use now for algorithms, and which hashes are susceptible to this, and which aren't? Like I said, there's no shortage of areas for us to study, right?
Agreed.
I mean, we've left so much uncovered, but just the stuff that you're talking about is like, when you talk about cryptography, that's something that people have to worry about. You've got these supercompute assets that can do these things. And so now what you thought was something safe of an algorithm, you're like, well, is it anymore? And maybe if it is for now, how long is that going to last? And what's the new way to approach this? You can't just have the same old cryptography all over the place. So it's interesting.
Absolutely. And what do you like to do outside the office?
Pretty much involved with the family. So I love soccer. That's a passion. Always has been, always will be.
Are you a player too?
Yeah, I play in an old man's league now.
There you go.
No, but I love it. I mean, if you're out there, you can compete and try to do everything you can to keep up with the younger generation, but you realize that you don't have that aggressive approach anymore, because you're like, I have a regular job and I don't want to be limping all week, or I got to mow the lawn and I don't want to be limping all week, or I got to, whatever it is, you don't want to be limping all week. So then you get a group of like-minded players, and I had the fortune of meeting up with this gentleman named Jim Schneider. And he had a team that plays in a league here, and they play at the Pit, and competitive, certainly, physical, certainly, but they're not going to cross that barrier where, one, they're going to take things personal, and it's going to turn into this fisticuffs, and number two, they're not going to try and do something to hurt themselves or you. Right? And so there's a lot of ex-pro players, really good players that are there. And you just rely on touch. And so, again, part of the soccer community, trying to pass that on to the next generation, my kids. I've got 3 boys.
Nice.
And I was always not worried. I knew that there was a possibility that they wouldn't play. And I'm not going to be that dad that's like, get out there, shut up. Give me 10 sit-ups. But they did develop a passion and a love for it, and they want to play. And so, as long as I can, I want to pass that on to them and participate with them. And so I coach their teams. And so I'm involved there. And I have taken on a new hobby, and this is just going to sound so lame, but it's just encompassing. My lawn has had the worst weeds you've ever seen in your life. It's just the worst. And I'm like, it just can't be this way.
Yeah.
And I had True Green for not to cut down True Green, but I had, and I didn't see anything there.
Yeah.
And so I started researching it, and little by little I started getting into it. And I was like, oh no, I got to get a real lawnmower, and not real like REAL, it's REEL, right? So it's on a reel.
Oh,
so it's, you don't remember the old ones,
Yeah.
So I got an old school one, and then realized that I didn't need that much cardio. I could use it, but I didn't want to do that much cardio.
Yeah.
So then I bought a powered one, a McLean 25-inch mower, and started seeing that it actually affects the grass. Instead of the rotary blades that tear it, this actually just kind of clips it, and the grass continues to grow, and you go lower and lower, and the grass gets tighter and tighter. And then you start learning about broadleaf weeds versus grassy weeds, and what you want to put down for pre-emergence and what you want to put down for fertilizers. And I know I'm going way off the dad deep end and stuff, but man, I got into it.
Well, so what inspired you to get that type of mower? Because that's a very specific thing. I mean, most people don't even know what those are. They look really cool too. I mean,
YouTube, where I learn everything.
There you go.
So you go on there and you see somebody saying, California trim lawnmowers are great, and da-da-da-da-da. And, they're only $6,000.
Only what now?
So when you talk about a lawnmower, you're like, oh, what? I could get a car for that,
Yeah.
And so my wife and I have this camaraderie between us where we enjoy getting something, but we want to try and get the best deal that we can.
Oh, yeah.
So then you look at McLean mowers, which do a fantastic job, and they're very good, and they're, gravitating around $3,000, $4,000. But if you get on Facebook Marketplace and start looking at good deals, and you know exactly what you want, you can eventually get it down to something much more reasonable, $700-800, something like that. Which I know people will be like, "You're just spending $800 on a lawnmower? What the heck's wrong with you?"
Oh, and I know people who go all out on their lawn.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's just like every hobby.
Like
it can get as expensive as you want it to.
Yeah, I could be out there with drones, right?
Oh yeah, that's true.
I can't fly a drone.
Yeah,
but yeah, it is. And so, but there is something to it, right? So I mentioned before balance, and we've got a soccer pitch in my backyard.
Oh yeah.
And so I don't want my kids out there stepping on whatever, weeds and thorns and things like that. So I want it to be decent.
Makes sense.
And then I've got the new 2 Cocker Spaniels.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so they're out there too, and it's cool. And when we entertain a lot, and so when we have friends, neighborhood friends, or soccer parties, or family and stuff over, it's cool. You have a nice, decent lawn, and they can all just it's another useful space. It's no longer the barren wasteland of weeds that are out there, and people scared to walk across it. So it's cool. They go out there, and you take pride. And I take, like I told you, I didn't come from a lot, so I take pride in just about everything that I've got. I want to make sure that I continue moving forward, and there's always forward progress. So that's my new hobby.
Very cool.
Is the
I like it. I've gotten into mine. It's a little disappointing because I rent, so I can't. It's just not as fulfilling when you're doing housework, but it still kind of feels good to see it come a little
cool.
more. Yeah,
It's
put down
cool.
some seed, get the right fertilizers.
Yeah, my wife tells me it's my shenanigans because it goes beyond the lawn, right? So now I want the flowers to look decent, the bushes to look decent. Those trees got to be trimmed, and so she's like, "No, just pay somebody to do it." And so nobody ever taught me how to do it, so I just climb up that tree and get as high as I can, start cutting those limbs. She's like, "Did you not see that video of the limb that fell on that guy, and you're gonna kill yourself?" So she's always worried about it. She calls it my shenanigans because I'm always up to something. And my neighbors, I'm sure that I'm quite the sight for them. I'm that guy.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the whatever season or day or whatever, I put all these things together, and my front yard looks like total crew came through there and stuff. And that's good, though. It's exercise, right?
Yeah.
You get out there, you get some oxygen, some sunshine.
Absolutely.
And I told my wife, I was like, the last house we had, we put in this Zeon Zoysia, which is amazing grass. And I was like, that was a pretty penny. You're spending close to 10 grand out there to put the grass down, and then all the effort and stuff. I was like, so I'll tell you what, this house, I got one of 2 choices. I fix this Bermuda and chop those trees up and get some sunshine going, or I spend a lot of money on that grass. And I ain't doing that, so.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's a car.
I'm telling you, man, it's interesting, some of these hobbies and these expenses.
Oh, yeah.
But at least, it's the gift that keeps on giving, right?
True.
So it's not like, I don't know, not to knock Taylor. It's not a Taylor Swift tickets. That's just. I can't go to a concert and then come out empty-handed. I'll be like, "What was that?"
Yeah,
I want to watch it on TV at home,
or on YouTube or Rumble or something like that.
Bingo. Yeah. I want to watch the Nick Topping podcast. I'll be on Rumble.
Exactly. Right. But yeah, I love getting into those hobbies and going down the rabbit hole and trying to perfect it. And gosh, stupid crabgrass keeps poking up left and right, so you got to put down different weed killers and rip it out. And yeah.
I never thought I'd be talking to anybody about quinchloride.
Yeah, do you mulch or do you actually bag?
So at the beginning of the season. So at the beginning of the season, you go and you dethatch when you remove all the dead grass that's in there and stuff, so that the canopy doesn't cover up the ground and get all the nutrients and the water rolling off and stuff. And I'm listening to myself talk, man. Okay, but anyway, so after you do the dethatching, then with the real mower, I do put the thing in the front, the basket in the front that catches it, the grass catcher, and it goes all in there, and you put it in the bags, and it's a lot easier than the rotary mowers where it's the bag in the back. Where you have to take it off and dump it in there. The grass catcher in the front is just this basket. It's so cool. You just like dump it, and that's it.
Really?
And you're like, that's interesting.
In the front?
Yeah, it's in the front. It's a front reel.
Yeah.
And so as the reel's turning, it's spitting the grass forward. And as it spits it forward, drops it in this basket. And so you just take the basket off. It's just 2 hooks. You take the basket off and dump it into the bag, and that's it. And then going down the rabbit hole, you start wondering, should I be doing this? Because it looks really cool, too. Like when a real mower cuts it, it stripes the lawn, and you're just like, look at me. And then after that, you're like, should I be doing that? And then you realize that as you learn more, it's good. The grass has proteins and stuff that go back into the lawn and stuff. So other than having a really pristine looking lawn, there's no other real reason to bag it. So you just let it go and you let it mulch down and everything. And then at the end of the season, again, you go through with a dethatcher, which is a totally different tool. My mom gets onto me. She's like, you don't need all these tools for the lawn. She's the love of God. You're that and your speeding habits. You got a problem here. But yeah, you go in through the dethatcher and take out the extra thatch that's built up at the bottom, and then start the process all over again.
Yeah.
It's a rabbit hole.
Well, it's a good point of pride. You could literally see the work before your eyes.
It could be worse, right? I could be in a gambling.
Yeah.
I could be down at the racetrack, covering horses.
Exactly.
Or I could race cars. I don't know, whatever.
I have an expensive hobby.
I have fairly inexpensive and fairly healthy hobbies, I think. And then, like I said, the rest of the time is with the family. I've recently taught my middle child, Landon, how to start playing the piano.
Oh, cool.
And then doing anything you can as a creative parent to get the kids away from the video games.
True.
Because, oh my gosh. So it's it's Fortnite now, I think is the big one.
Oh yeah.
It started off with what's the one where they build their worlds?
Oh, Minecraft.
Minecraft. It started off with Minecraft. Now we've moved into Fortnite, and then they've gotten their soccer teammates all online too to do it.
Oh,
and then they get their headphones on and like. And we and I are talking about Atari. I'm out there with River Raid and Frogger.
Oh yeah, you played River Raid?
Oh yeah.
That was my good.
I was the River Raid ninja.
Oh, that's the best Activision game. It's got nothing out of Call of Duty.
That was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's got the blue cartridge.
Yeah.
I remember that one. I played it at my grandpa's all the time.
I thought you were too young to see it. You play? Oh, it was your grandfather's game.
Oh, yeah.
That's how young you are.
They had the Sears TV that was made out of wood, which is not. That's how you know electronics are quality.
What do they make them out of now?
Oh, plastique. It's fancy. Oil.
Yeah, that was it. But yeah, getting them off of those video games and and that's it. And then there's a few guilty pleasures, I think is the way that you would call it when you binge on certain I don't watch too much TV, but my wife and I will find some shows in common, and we'll watch those. So I think House of Dragons is something that's on now. That's pretty cool. There's a new series. That's not new. It's new to me, called Rome. That was pretty good. So I hope I'm not letting too much out here, but the Boys is out there.
Oh yeah,
and that's just very different and twisted.
YouTube is pushing that hard. It's like half my suggestions.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I figured maybe they got a partnership with Prime.
That's one. What guy? That's with the Homelander, right? Like a Superman parody, but he's a dick. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
That's one way of describing it. It's basically if there were no
parents,
restrictions or inhibitions and you had superpowers.
Yeah, precisely.
Right? And not all your superpowers are the cool ones, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody runs fast. Not everybody can make ice. Some of the superpowers are really just, But you can certainly have a level of appreciation for the creativity that these writers have in there, because there's very few shows. There's a good show when every episode or every other episode there's a oh crap moment. You're like, oh, did not see that coming. So it's pretty good. So I like series like that keep me on my toes. I don't want to be able to predict everything. I don't want to know that Fonzie's going to jump the shark.
Right.
I knew that. Like, here's Fonzie. Like, see Fonzie in a swimsuit. You're like, oh, this is not going to go well. He's probably going to jump a shark.
There's some shows I can't believe The Simpsons is still on TV.
Is it really?
Yeah, exactly my reaction. It's somehow still
I knew
around.
when they were the longest running sitcom when they were like at 27 years.
Oh, yeah.
This is like long after even Conan O'Brien stopped writing for them and left them and everything. I don't know what else they could come up with, I thought there's only a few good seasons, like Three's Company or something.
I think that is it. I mean, I don't know. Like, when I talk to people anecdotally, the biggest response is, it's still on? Like,
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Because also, those are such...
they really adapt.
Iconic voices that, there's only so many things Hank Azaria can do.
Yeah.
It's like he's run out of voices, Right? So there's only so many catchphrases you can program into a Bart Simpson doll.
Eat my shorts.
Yeah, it's like, about it. So, yeah.
And then what was it like being a landlord for a New York minute?
So I've been a landlord a couple of times. Again, diversification is something. I was never a landlord out of circumstance the way it was this time.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. So my mother came to live with us a couple of years ago, and we had enough room, but we realized that she really wanted more privacy, right? Yeah. So I've got a house full of boys. Everything in my house is male. They're all boys. My poor wife is outnumbered. Like even the dogs are always boys. So, the furnitures are boys. The televisions are boys. No. So, my mom came to live with us, and the boys don't give or provide a lot of privacy.
Right.
So they run into our bathroom between video games or videos or whatever, or after a pool party, whatever it is. And so my wife said, hey, listen, we need to redesign the house so that your mother has her own private areas and feels a little bit more whole, because it can be the opposite of empowering when you live with someone, because your independence is taken away and your privacy is taken away and stuff. And that's just part of the journey of having an elderly parent. And so she started talking to a lot of contractors who were more than happy to come in and provide suggestions and ideas. And I was like, man, this house is just not made to be redesigned that way. Because while we have the room, now you're going to have this narrow, weird hallway. And what if we ever want to sell it? And then that's going to be odd because it's going to be customized to us. And somebody else is going to be like, no, I don't think so. Yeah. So it wasn't that great. So in the course of that, we started venturing out to open houses to see, like, are there ideas? Maybe we're thinking about it wrong. Maybe we need something detached. Maybe we need, another whole area, whatever it was. And we came upon this house in Prosper that was in this fantastic, beautiful neighborhood. And it had its own mother-in-law suite. And it was just like, that's awesome. Yeah. So we ended up getting that house. Nice. And we jumped on it because the market was super hot at the time. So we weren't that smart about it. We were purchasing at the hottest time. Yeah. And we weren't prepared to sell. We were prepared to sell. We had not prepped for sale. Yeah. And so we were like, great, we're going to take that house, Yeah. And we had a couple of houses that when we looked at them and we inquired about them, they're like, they're gone. They're off the market. And there was one house that a family offered like $200,000 over asking cash, So it didn't have to be a loan. It didn't have to go through the qualifications. Even if it was a cash offer, they didn't have to get an inspection. I mean, the rules change a lot in real estate when you do certain things in cash. Yeah. So it was a group of families that were moving to the country that grouped their money together and just like blew and I was like, I didn't know what the offer was. Yeah. But I was like, well, we're willing to go above asking. And they were like, significantly above, and I was like, 1,001. I was like, what? Yeah. So, but we didn't want that to happen. So all the stars aligned, and we ended up in the house where I am now. We jumped on it. We moved quickly. We pre-qualified. We put a good amount of money down. Yada yada yada. But we hadn't sold the other property, and so by the time we prepped and were ready to go, there had been I think the Fed had raised the interest rates. Yeah. And so that never does wonders for the market. The timing was wrong. It was at the end of the summer, so families aren't moving anymore. They're like, my kids are going to be going to school. We don't need to be moving and stuff. Yeah. So the things didn't go out. The circumstances didn't align well. And we said, okay, we'll pivot and we'll rent for a year or something until, next year and the time is right again. And maybe by then interest rates will go down. I don't know.
Yeah.
So we started heading down that path, and we had a gentleman offer us, rent a year in advance and no worries and yada, yada, yada. And so we were like, okay, great, we'll take it, And so then, he moved in, and we had the lease was for a year and a half, but he paid a year in advance.
Yeah.
So my thought process was, if you're not paying a rent for a year, then you should be able to have the next 6 months just fine. And then it ended up turning into an absolute nightmare.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's got a horror story. I just felt like in the neighborhood that we were in, not that there's any horrible neighborhoods or anything, or that nothing ever happens bad in a good neighborhood, but we thought the probability of having problems would be lessened, by somebody who's renting a house that's the size, square footage that we had and the location that we had. Anyway, weird things that he did, tearing off the bottom of a garage door.
What?
Like just the seal on the bottom of a garage door.
Was he inebriated in any way? Or?
I'm telling you, the effort to do it is substantial. Because you've got a garage door and it has a Trek on the bottom, and then you put in a piece of metal with a piece of rubber on the bottom, right? So it's a sweep, essentially. Just like your house door, your front door, it'll have a sweep that you put in on the bottom, and people go out there and look at your doors, and you can pull that sweep out from under there. But just to pull that off, big garage door and stuff, and to put it back on, my brother and I we spent so much time.
Really?
Yeah. And so there was a couple of things like that they did that you're like, why? Like, why would you do this? There was cups that were buried. So these plastic cups, like for beverages, and they weren't.
And was it trash?
It was, but no, it was like brand new. It was like a.
What?
Like 100 cups.
Okay.
And it looked like, little tiny cups you'd hand out at a soccer game, and you'd have a drink of Gatorade or whatever. And I went out there to remulch the flower beds. Yeah. And so I was getting some stuff out of the way, and I was like, oh, there's a cup. That's weird. Maybe they use it to scoop something. Wait a minute. There's another and another. And before I knew it, there's this pile of cups. And I was like, okay.
What the hell?
It was weird. And then I had banana trees in that house. They were really, really cool around the pool. It kind of made it look like an oasis. And banana trees are...
go back to the cups. Did you text them? Or why would you...
No. Because the guy had ghosted us. Like, he just disappeared. There's like a lot of unethical things for a real estate agent to do.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And that's something that it'd be like me hacking something as a cybersecurity professional. Like, I'm going against what I do in my industry. So he, as a real estate agent, should be, one, forthright with what they're doing. True. Certainly have good rental history. Certainly have good background. And then not ruin their rental or their credit history by, just leaving or doing something untoward. Ethics is big in real estate, right? And the TREC, the Texas Real Estate Commission, I think is what it is. Takes that very serious, and they'll investigate you for it. So you don't want to be. It's good, like law enforcement, right?
Yeah.
You could go petty larceny or shoplifting if you're a cop. But that's just not what you want to be doing. So found those cups. That was really weird. Poisoned the banana trees, which is really odd to me because they were part of what made the property look really good.
How did he poison them?
I don't know. I just know that when we found them, they were all dead and poisoned and stuff. And they're perennials.
This guy was sober.
It's weird. It was really weird.
Like, I know guys will bury like ammo or silver or treasure, but it was burying new cups.
I did find a bunch of colored pebbles too that you usually would put into a fire pit.
Oh yeah.
And they were really nice, and they were buried too. I found that was weird. Another one was the cover to the drain at the bottom of the pool had been removed. Not broken, just removed. It was removed.
Just vanished?
No. It was over by the pool equipment, and so we got it put back on.
What?
But it was just removed. It was just the weirdest stuff where I was like...
And this wasn't a friend who was just pranking you with random crap?
I don't have friends, Nick. You know that. You bring things like that up. No, but it was like just these weird things that had happened, and I was just like, who does this and why? I mean, just like really bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, the guy just turned out to be an enigma. Just a lot of question marks were left, and so again, I know that's not everybody's experience.
Of course.
I grew up in Carrollton. I mentioned that my uncles had a lot of real estate properties in Carrollton. I think my younger uncle, he had about 40 houses at one point.
Oh, wow.
And he did, that's a lot of what he did was, on the weekends, he'd gather all of us boy cousins, throw us in the back of the station wagon, and we would go repairing fences and replacing carpet and painting walls and getting it ready for the next tenant and da-da-da-da-da. So I knew the experiences, some are bad, some are good, but they're not all awful. This was just outright bizarre. I mean, just bizarre things. And I don't want to go down the whole list of everything that happened there.
Well, what's the top one? What was one or two that stood out the most to you?
Tearing out the kitchen sink
What?
was another one. That was just so weird to me. I was like...
And he didn't replace it? He just took it... Wait, what?
It was like... so kitchen sinks are not all one piece always, especially if they have granite countertops. They're sealed on there with this clear seal around there.
Yeah.
And you got to really work hard at it, but if you want, you can push down enough on it to where it separates itself from the granite countertop.
Yeah.
And we got there, it was just separated. It's like... What are you doing, dude? Like, what do you just ask these questions like, what in the world is the point? So I don't know. I mean, there was just little weird things like that you just didn't understand, that didn't make sense. I don't know.
That's so weird.
It's just, again, just going through it in my mind, I feel like a little traumatized because it was in the not too far distant past.
Yeah.
So
that made me so paranoid about renting to anyone again. Like,
I don't feel like I would.
Yeah.
I just don't feel like I would because it's not judging anybody that's in any state of their life. Just the point is, I feel like when people own something of their own, they're more than likely going to take better care of it than your stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, you share your jacket with me. Whatever. I might get some salsa stain or whatever.
Of course.
But myself, But it's things like that. So I just feel like your probability, and that's not to discourage anybody, because there's a lot of people who make their entire fortune. I mean, real estate is a wonderful thing to make their fortune in. It's just that as time goes on, as in all aspects of life, the world evolves and things get smarter. And it's like you said, would you do this with a restaurant? Landlords are dipping their hands into everything they can, and everything else is your problem and not theirs. And it's not covered under the loan. I don't have to do this, and I don't have to. So it's like, as time goes on, it becomes more advantageous for the bigger guys and less advantageous for the little guys and stuff. And tax laws are
very true.
Let's not get too deep into that, but it's things like that. So we're landlords for a little bit. I think that the main reason I'm discouraged from going into it is that there's just too much focus for me in life in other areas at this point. Yeah. Again, you got the restaurant, and then you want to do everything you can to make yourself relevant and be good at what you do. If you take pride, if you're in cybersecurity, and you got to constantly study everything that's going on out there. So that's important. And then you've got life in general, right? 3 boys and the wife and 2 dogs and the mother. Living there, and then we're not neglecting the lawn. That's for sure.
That's right.
So I'm like, I don't need a rental house on top of that.
Sure.
Especially if something goes south. I mean, what are you gonna do? An air conditioning system goes bad, and then you got to go out there. Yeah. Or what if you don't get called? Like, they may not call you, and then you walk in one day, and there was one time where some of our friends in the neighborhood called us and were like, you might want to tell your tenant to turn off the sprinklers because it's freezing, and then you just see this frozen arch of water. And it was like, not only were the sprinklers running, but the sprinkler heads had broken off.
Oh, no.
So it wasn't that just they poured, it was like this fountain that was frozen.
Oh, jeez.
You go there and knock it down. And you're like, hey, hate to bother you, but
what the hell?
Yeah. So it's things like that. And then last but not least, there's always that fear of, do you have the rent?
Yeah.
And if you don't, after the 3rd day, then what are the penalties? And are they going to accrue? Or are you going to pay for them? And, just little things like that you just got to go through. The other thing that was weird was all the, this is stupid, but it was still weird, is all the toilets had broken seats.
What? What the hell?
You don't want to replay that in your head. You're like, how does this happen? That catch off guard over there.
What
happened?
It's like, how much stuff is breaking over there? Oh my gosh.
So it was just, it's interesting. I mean, you just get a glimpse into somebody's thought process, and you just like, for sure they didn't break that one upstairs. That was back in the boy. Oh no, that's broken too.
It's like, what are the odds?
Well, that's interesting, you know. So yeah, it's things like that. So, yeah,
And
I don't think I'll be going back to being a landlord anytime soon.
And I almost forgot to ask, winding back the clock a couple of years, what was it like meeting Joe Rogan? How do you meet him?
Oh yeah. So for the audience that doesn't know, we're talking about podcasts, and I was asking Nick. I was like, "Hey, you know, how'd you start? Like, I don't know anything about podcasts. How'd you start a podcast, and how'd you make it so successful? I mean, just wildly successful." You know, so we started talking about you know, well, Rogan, and that's kind of where the conversation went. And I had an interesting little story where I said, you know, I met Joe Rogan once before he went on the podcast and started doing all this stuff. This was prior to or around-ish his Fear Factor days, but I think it was, what was the show we talked about?
Oh,
News Radio?
News Radio. Yeah.
So he's on News Radio at the time. So nowhere near the success, and certainly not affiliated with the UFC. So during the MySpace days, for those of you who can remember that far back, it was easy to create a profile and basically be a nefarious actor and socially engineer people, which was what I was doing. So my cybersecurity roots run way back.
Right.
So I was socially engineering celebrities and making friends with them, and just for the sake of having this roster of celebrity friends, you know, that I never thought I would meet or anything. Well, when Joe Rogan had his MySpace page, one of the videos that was on it was his feud with Carlos Mencia.
Oh, yeah?
And the fact that Carlos Mencia's real name is Ned, and that a lot of people accused him of stealing jokes from comedians, and then he got confronted, and then he used those jokes to be wildly successful and have this wonderful show. Everybody remembers Mind of Mencia, and it was so crazy, and he's so crazy, and you know, all this kind of stuff. And so comedians don't play those games. I learned, I don't know, but I learned that they're a tight-knit community, and that they are very much practitioners of their art. You know, and they create those jokes. And if you don't think that's hard, try to write a funny joke, and then try to perform it, and then try to deliver it in the right way. So you'll learn a different appreciation for these guys that get up there and can just kill it because they act like they have this great personality. But it's refined. It's an art form. Anyway, I didn't know Joe Rogan was a comedian at the time, and I saw all of this stuff, and so I got a giggle out of it, and so I sent him a message, and I was like, hey, I saw this. This is kind of cool, yada, yada, yada. And we started gabbing back and forth. And I was like, oh, my God, I think I'm talking to Joe Rogan. So then he says one day, he goes, hey, man, I'm coming to Dallas. Do you want to meet up or something? You want to talk? I'm doing a show at the Improv in Addison. And so I was like, wow, that's cool. And I just talked to my wife. I was like, you want to go down? She's like, yeah. So he's like, hey, listen, I'll put 2 tickets at will call. And then come in there, I'll buy you a drink, yada, yada, yada. So we go in. I didn't know what to expect, and I don't know what the protocol is, you know. I mean, you're talking to somebody, and they have some level of fame, and, you know, whatever. So he came out. He was in the kitchen. He was hanging out, came out, sat down, and we just started talking. And I was incredibly impressed and surprised with just what a genuine person he is, you know. Just himself. It was like a dude that I knew. It's just a guy that you knew, like a personality. It wasn't awkward, wasn't weird. It's not like this.
Yeah.
You know? No. But no, it flowed, and it was simple, and we watched a couple of acts and stuff, and I'm sure he doesn't remember it by now. The initial topic, the icebreaker, was of course what happened with Mencia, you know, and then after that it was just talking, and he was on the tour, and he killed it too. He killed it that night, you know. And so definitely worth the 2-drink minimum of the
Improv. You're right.
No, but it was cool, man. And it was just like, you know, and now the guy's got this, I don't know what the deal is, but he's got this crazy deal with Spotify.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just got him making hand over fist, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, all the notoriety that goes, and the fame and the accolades that go along with the UFC and the travel and stuff. And just living life on his own terms, and having these really interesting discussions. And it's just such an alluring thing, because we all feel like we've got something. I'm long-winded. But, well, I've got something interesting to say. Why don't I get on the radio and create this, you know, this podcast, and I'll talk about cool stuff. And the only people who did that and were interesting were the cast of Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh yeah, they have a good one. I like that. They have a really good
awesome.
podcast.
They were really good
yeah.
when they were on there. But no, I mean, you have to find relevant topics, and you have to keep it interesting. You have to keep it fresh, and then you have to keep people entertained. And that's a hard part. Is when you're on and talking, people need to really invest and glue into what you're saying, or else you're talking at people. You know, and that's it. And so that's kind of how that went. And no, we did not stay in touch. But if I think he watches your stuff, right? So Joe, if you want to give me a call, I mean,
totally.
Nick's got my phone number. I know you've got his contact info.
Oh, absolutely.
We'll go to hang out and throw some USC tickets our way or something like that, as long as nobody jumps out of the cage and comes after me. Cyber security,
precisely, not physical security.
So,
and then speaking of meeting people and physical security, what was it like meeting the Secret Service?
Yeah. So that was cool. Here recently, we had that failed assassination attempt where somebody else was unfortunately killed. But we start talking about Secret Service and the physical attributes that you need to be a part of that group, and then the demands of that job. And when I was working for the restaurant investment firm, there was a case where the Secret Service, I did not know that Homeland Security spans so far.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so they were like, yeah, we're part of the Secret Service. I'm like, shouldn't you be protecting someone?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're investigating cyber crimes as part of Homeland Security and as part of this program, yada, yada, yada. And so they've traced the point of origin to one of your restaurants. And so we need to find out if your system, if your network and your point of sale are all safe. So I went through the explanation of why it was, and I showed them all of the controls and safeguards that we had in place, and it had nothing to do with the actual technology. What it boiled down to, and they pulled this guy over, was there was a waiter, and I can't imagine what it's like to be pulled over by the Secret Service. I mean, that's crazy. But there was this waiter. The way the scheme works is, and this was coming out of Russia, so it's interesting. So, not that it wouldn't be interesting if it had come out of somewhere else, but the story is that you get these skimmers that fit in the palm of your hand, and I'm finished eating my food or whatever, and here's my credit card, and then you just swipe it, and then you go through the point of sale, and nobody's the wiser, and that's it. At the end of the week, what happens is you take the skimmer, and as a waiter, and you can be tempted by this, or maybe you're young, I don't know, whatever the case is, but you give the skimmer back to the person who gave it to you, and they give you about $1,500 a week.
Really?
So that's about the going rate. You get about $1,500 a week, and you get thousands of credit cards captured there. So their track 2 information is where it is, and they'll take that information off of there. They'll take all the data that's on there. They'll send it back to Russia or to Spain or another country, and then somebody there will have a bunch of blank credit cards, and then they'll just print it and program that information on there. Now I've got a valid account, and I'll go buy my jet skis and just tons of stuff. And we're talking about like expensive stuff. So they'll start off with $5 subscription here. Did you notice? $50 magazines, or whatever it is. If you don't notice after $50, then it's like, let's go get some jet skis. Let's go get some, like crazy stuff, right? Or some volume of shoes, like 500 pairs of sneakers or whatever. Because then, the alarms are going to go off like crazy. And by that time you've got the product, you don't care. This thing is dead. Throw it away, whatever. It doesn't matter. Yeah. And you move on. Like that's all there is to it. But then you take that product that you've got and you sell it. Yeah. You go on Marketplace or wherever. Like you just go sell it, authentic this or, willing to part with that or whatever. And so that was the scam. And so the Secret Service came, and I'm curious by nature. And I was like, so where do I get a job at?
Yeah. Well, you guys hiring?
Where do I get a job at? What are you doing on? Like I've seen your Yelp reviews are great. And so they were a little bit younger. Well, I say they're like in their 30s, 35 or so, and they were like, "Well, number one, you're too old already." And I was like, "How dare you? Don't you know I play soccer?" But no, they were like, "Listen, when you first come into the Secret Service, the first detail that you go on to is going to be security, right? So personal security, and so that's an exhausting job. You're standing there at the ready like a statue all the time, scanning, and they're like, you're talking about being on your feet 13, 14, 15 hours a day. You do that for 10, 12 years. So you're coming in when you're 40 years old. Yep. Anybody wants no 56-year-old bodyguard, right? Like whatever it is. So they're like, so that the physical part of it happens when you're in the inception of your career at the very beginning. And so later on, you move on to these other areas that Homeland Security covers and stuff. And they said, they also want you to be like 6'2" or so. And it's a demanding difficult job. It's a very difficult job. It's not all glamour and earpieces and sunglasses. And then you also have to be quite willing to jump in and take that bullet. I mean, that's the job, right? Like it's not like it's not in your job description.
Precisely.
But I was curious. I was just asking, because cybersecurity is my passion.
Yeah.
So but I was asking.
Did they show up in the suits like in the movies?
Oh yeah. They showed up like the Men in Black.
There you go.
It was really. They had their little cards ready to go. They handed it to me. I was like, I got to learn that technique.
Right.
Yeah. They did not have earpieces, but they certainly fit the mold. Mm-hmm. Even their speech pattern and cadence was very,
textbook.
Yeah, and this is Agent Smith, Sierra, Michael, India, Tango Hotel. Yeah, so it was like, you don't need to spell that for me. They laughed at my jokes. So
there you go.
So no, but they were personal. They were real nice guys and stuff. But it was an interesting story to go through, and thank goodness we came out unscathed. It wasn't like we were compromised, and then that would have been a whole other series of fines and problems and PCI violations and yada yada yada. Because it is card holder relevant, and so that was another very interesting situation that occurred.
Absolutely. Well, we'll have to have you on again soon to hear more stories.
Are you kicking me out already?
Yeah, it's good.
Is there something coming up?
No, not yet.
We're having a good time.
But thanks so much for coming on the show, Charles.
It was
appreciate
a pleasure. I appreciate it, man. I value your friendship, and I think that you've just done a fantastic job with your business.
Much appreciated.
The level of energy and commitment that you have to it. I've been there for, all the stories and everything. So, always a pleasure to come on.
You know me, 105 hours a week, can't be beat.
No, that cannot be beat. That should not be beat.
No. Thanks, everyone, for taking the time to tune in. Don't forget to take the time to like, subscribe, and comment. Also, don't forget to take time to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe. You have a great day. Topping Talks.